some disease-causing, parasitic, pathogenic flagellates. And the first one we're going to discuss is one that's present here in California. It's called Giardia. 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 And this little guy, although I wouldn't want to be infected with Giardia, it's actually very cute. I know, cute. What? Yeah, I'm such a bad biologist, but they are. It's like a Gary Larson cartoon. Giardia are intestinal pathogens. They live in our intestine. They live in our intestine, where they can cause a watery, foul-smelling, stinky, foul-smelling, often fatty, and we'll describe why it's often fatty, diarrhea. Now, some of your classmates have had this, and they've said it's very painful. In addition, they said it caused severe abdominal cramps, so it was pretty painful, right? Yeah. So, what you all are going to look at, you all are going to be looking at fecal smears. Yeah, it's so cool, you guys. Oh my goodness, you're going to love it. Okay, you're going to love looking at these fecal smears. And what you're going to look for is one of the stages of Giardia called a trophozoite. A trophozoite. This is the form of Giardia that's living and feeding in our intestinal tract. It's growing and dividing by binary fission. And these guys, like I said, they're so doggone cute. Okay, they look like a little teardrop. That's what I always scan. A fecal smear, I look for these little teardrop-shaped cells. And what makes them so attractive, I think, is they have two nuclei side by side, and both nuclei have a single nucleolus. So it looks like they look like eyes with pupils. So if you get them just right, it looks like they're like Gary Larson cartoons. So cute. Oh my goodness. Okay. Now, the way they attach to our intestinal walls, the way they attach to our intestinal epithelial cells, they have a ventral, which means on the bottom, a ventral sucker. And you probably really won't be able to make it out, but I'll just put it here. This is the ventral sucker or adhesive disc. Yeah, like a sucker, it sucks onto our adhesive disc is probably a more professional way to say it. Okay, and so what these little guys do, if say this is the my epithelial cells of my intestinal tract, this would be the lumen. Let's pretend this is a little Giardia. What they do is to prevent themselves from being washed out with our feces and food, is they'll settle on top of our intestinal epithelial cells, and they use the adhesive disc to attach to our intestinal epithelial cells so they won't get pooped out, literally, right? As food, fluid, feces moves through the intestinal tract. So they use the ventral sucker to attach to our intestinal epithelial cells. Now, there are reports that in some cases, there's so many Giardia attached to the surface of the intestines, it looks like it's been paved. It's just solid Giardia, right? And as a consequence, we can't absorb nutrients, we can't absorb water. And that's what's going to contribute to the diarrhea, the watery, foul-smelling diarrhea. It's often described as being fatty. And one of the reasons is fats can't be absorbed if you have lots and lots of Giardia lining your intestinal tract. And a consequence of chronic long-term infections is deficiency in fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin A, D, E, and K. Some people where the diagnosis isn't made, appropriately or quickly, some people that have Giardia infections for years or 2 years and they have really bad cases, they'll have a wasting syndrome. They just start losing weight, wasting syndrome. And a lot of times it's like, oh, they've just had Giardia the whole time and nobody knew about it. Yeah. Okay, so why we call this guy a flagellate is it's got 4 pairs of flagella. I know, isn't it just adorable? I know, sorry you guys, but I mean, come on, you gotta love the guy, right? Okay, so this beautiful little trophozoite with the flagellum that it uses to swim, to reach the intestinal wall. Now, this is important, you guys. The trophozoite is very delicate, very delicate. So these guys will get defecated, they'll be pooped out, so you can see them in feces. But because they're so delicate, if the feces dries, anything that harms the cytoplasmic membrane, these little guys are going to die. Even if, like, if we took fresh feces that had the trophozoites in them and we were, say, fecal contaminated food or water, we swallowed them, they're quickly destroyed in our stomach. Okay, so the trophozoite is not what we call the infectious form. The infectious form is a second stage called the cyst. Okay, so trophozoites in the intestine, they will form cysts, and these cysts are tough, resistant resting stages. And the job of the cyst is to protect the genetic information of the giardia when the cyst is excreted in feces. And the cyst can survive for a long time in the environment. If we swallow the cyst in fecal contaminated food or drinking water, the cyst is not destroyed by the stomach acid. It enters the intestinal tract, it excists, and gives rise to the trophozoite. So this is a two-way street. Okay, when we have formation of the cyst, it's called encystment. And then when the cyst gives rise to the trophozoite, it's called, the process is it excists. I won't ask that on the lab practical, but just so you know that they have terms for formation of the cyst and then when the cysts give rise to the trophozoites. Okay. And then once the cysts give rise to the trophozoites, they start feeding, they start multiplying, and that's when we get the watery, foul-smelling diarrhea. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Octavia, sorry.
You said originally the trophozoite was not the infectious form that they
Okay, that's such a good question. It causes a lot of confusion. Okay, when I use the term, you guys, infectious form, I mean what form are we swallowing to become infected? Yeah, and so that's how I'm going to use it. It's like infectious form. Which stage must we swallow to become infected?
Cyst.
And so for these intestinal pathogens, these intestinal parasites, it's almost always the cyst. Because the trophozoite is so easily killed in our stomach acid. Yeah, so that's so good because that, believe me, that causes a lot of confusion on the lab practical. Yeah. It's the trophozoite, is it's feeding and multiplying in our intestine that causes the clinical signs and symptoms, right? But it's not the infectious form. The cyst is the infectious form. Yeah. Yeah.
So you say these multiply. It might be a stupid question. But
No.
The nucleus, I'm used to like one nucleus and they split. This has two nucleus, so
It has
makes
two
a copy with two.
Right, and I'll have to double check this, but I think what happened when it forms a cyst, and I'll have to be careful, guys. Let me put a question mark here. I think there'll actually be, and I hope this is right, like 4 nuclei in the cyst, and when it excists, it gives, it releases. Oh gosh, see, I'll have to be really careful here. I think I'm getting the entamoeba, histolytic, and the giardia confused. It will give rise to a trophozoite, and what happens is, if the trophozoite has more than one nucleus, it'll divide to give rise to additional trophozoites, and then you can have nuclear division as well. So, before I muddle the waters more, let me go get a diagram to make sure that I'm not causing more confusion. But the thing with these protists is that they can undergo, there's 2 processes, you guys, and I know this is, okay, cytokinesis is when the cell itself splits, okay, but then you can have the nucleus splitting, you know, either through mitosis or meiosis. So even though we, like when we're learning cell and molecular biology, we use the term often mitosis to suggest both the nucleus is dividing and the cell is dividing. In reality, if we want to be really nitpicking, mitosis describes nuclear division, and cytokinesis is when the cell actually divides, the cytoplasm divides. And what a lot of these parasites can do, they can have multiple nuclear division, so you can have a multinucleated cell before it'll divide. So some of them will have 2 nuclei, some of the cysts will have 4 nuclei. So they're doing it very differently than our human cells do. They just are much more flexible in cell division and nuclear division. So I think I just kind of made a